Okay, so everybody take a look at my screen really quick up here. And basically you see a circle in the middle of a field. Does this have any dimension? It has 0 dimension, right? I mean, it's flat, basically, right? Does this have dimension? Or the illusion of dimension? Right, why? What's the difference? Why does one give you the sense that it's dimensional and the other one not?
Highlights and shadows.
Exactly. It's as simple as that. It's highlights and shadows. So what we see here is that the highlight on one side, shadow on the other side, even though this is a 2-dimensional screen, it's flat. It gives you the illusion of dimension. And the same thing happens in our photography. I mean, our photographs are flat. I mean, they're 2-dimensional, renderings. But all of them, not all of them, but certainly a lot of them contain the illusion of dimension, and it all is created by shadow and highlight. So if we want to bring the sense of dimension out, we actually increase shadow and highlight. That's why when you guys use the contrast sliders or clarity slider, any of those are all contrast moves, and it tends to give you a sense of greater texture, a greater dimension, all of that kind of stuff. But we can go to the flip side of that as well. If you want to suppress texture, if you want to suppress dimension, then you remove shadow and highlight. The more that you can get it down to being a single one tone, the less dimension it appears to have. Does that make sense to everyone? What's going on? All right, so I'm going to close this guy up. With the Skin as Retouch open, I want you to zoom into this girl's chin, and you're going to see a pimple right on the bottom of her chin. So before we get into actually working on this part, I do this for a number of reasons, the order in which we do this in. So we need to have a conversation before we actually start it. And the conversation about this is this. You've got a friend who knows that you are in this retouching class, and they say to you, God, I've heard you do retouching. You're in Versa's class. It's got to be amazing. I've got 8 full-length fashion images I want to retouch. I'll pay you $100. Would you take that job? You don't know? All right, let me rephrase that question. You've got a friend who has 8 full-length fashion images, and they say, I'll give you $100 if you'll retouch these for me, and you look at them and you say, it is going to take me 10 minutes to knock out those 8 images. Would you take that job? Oh yeah, now everybody's like, of course I would, right? Yeah, because if you're going to make $100 in 10 minutes, that's $600 an hour. That's not a bad wage, right? So this brings us to the way that we have to approach retouching. And what it really boils down to is the effort that you're going to put in it worth it? And so what I would say to you is that in our situation, friend, full-length images, fashion, they need it. They got $100. For me, I whip out the clone stamp tool, the healing brush tool, and I just beat the shit out of those images. And I don't care if I destroy that skin texture. They're full length to begin with, and they're probably going to be on Instagram regardless, and nobody's going to know. I'm going to make $100. It took me 10 minutes to do it, and I'm off to the races. Don't really care. That's one extreme. The opposite extreme is you get approached by L'Oreal to retouch Julia Roberts for a whole new ad campaign that they're doing, and they're going to offer you $20,000 to do a single image of her. Are you going to spend 10 minutes doing that using the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool and just smack the shit out of her skin so that she looks plastic? No, you're not. You're actually going to take considerably more time and effort to do the one single most important thing about serious skin retouching, and that is maintain the texture of the skin. That is the holy grail of it all. So what I'm going to show you today is the $20,000 skin retouching approach. And then as we go on later into the semester, we will look at the cheaper, faster, but still hopefully better ways of doing it than just smacking the shit out of it with the healing brush tool and destroying all skin texture. Does that make sense to everyone, our approach? So I'm going to tell you this right now. This assignment could possibly take you longer than any of the other assignments that you'll have in this class. It is, for some people, incredibly tedious. For other people, they find liberation in this. This is where you really find out the people who think they might want a serious career in retouching, or the people who would rather pay for someone else to do it. So at any rate, I'm prefacing all of this. I'm going to show you some examples in all of this, whatever, but this, what I'm showing you right now today, this is how the big boys and girls do it for the big bucks. But the thing that you've got to remember in all of this is it is all about maintaining texture. It's all about maintaining texture. That is the holy grail in all of this. So, how do you guys dodge and burn? I keep asking these questions, and either you have completely checked out, or you're too scared to answer me, or you don't dodge and burn, or I don't know what the answer is, but there's got to be some of you guys who do some dodging and burning somehow. Anyone? Okay, how many of you people have ever used the soft light layer to dodge and burn? Anyone? Oh, well, at least a couple of people. So for the rest, how many haven't? Okay, well, then we're going to look at it. So what I need everybody to do is, with this image open, first things first, you always, especially in retouching, you always make a duplicate of your background, regardless of what else we're going to do. So Command J. This is just our safety. I'm going to double click on this and rename it, and I'm going to call it Pixel. What we are going to do today, though, is a little bit of pixel retouching, but the majority of what we're going to do today is what's called tonal retouching. However, the layer order that we do this in is critical. So I need everybody to write this down. It's not really going to come up for this project, but it is going to come up for the whole rest of the semester. And it is the order in which you do your retouching, starting from the base layer at the bottom, working our way all the way up to output sharpening at the end. The order in which we do this is critical. And the reason it's critical is that you do not want to inadvertently bake something into one of your processes, one of your layers, that forces you to start completely over if you got something wrong. So what we're trying to do is maintain the ultimate flexibility. So the order in which we do this is, the first layer, the very first moves you would make are pixel. So pixel retouching is exactly the tools I'm telling you I don't want to use. It is the clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, patch tool, anything that actually modifies pixels. That's the first step that we take. The second step is tonal. Tonal is what we're going to be going over right now, so just write it down as your layer and then we'll actually move on. The next step above that would be color grading. Now that's very different than doing color work. The image that we start with at our base right here, even though this is not a smart object based on raw data, it very well should be if we had it. This is actually a scan of a piece of film, so there never was raw data for this. But nonetheless, you would want to fix the color, at least to neutralize the color, so that you were starting from an image that had been color corrected. But that all happens in Camera Raw. That would not be something we're doing here in Photoshop. What you ultimately do in Photoshop are small color tweaks if you're trying to match something, or color grading if you're trying to give it an effect, or things like split toning. You want your shadows to be blue and your highlights to be yellow. Those are all pictorial effects that we're actually adding. Those would happen after you do your tonal work. After that, you end up going into liquify. Liquify is pixel work, but you can't do liquify until you get all of the retouching part done. So for instance, if I need to move this girl's nose, I want to do the retouching on her skin before I move her nose, so that if the move of her nose is wrong, I don't have to then go back and redo all the retouching. I simply undo the liquefy part of it or redo the liquefy part of it. If I do it in the other order, if I move her nose and then do all the retouching on top of it, that's what I'm talking about, having it baked in. If the nose is in the wrong place, if what I did to the nose is wrong, that means I have to do all the retouching that followed it. Again, don't want to do that. So liquefy, it happens. And then at the very top end of that would be output sharpening. Now there's ultimately other subtle stages that we will go through. Occasionally we will repeat a pixel retouch a little bit higher up in the stack for a specific reason. But this is basically the order that you're going to always follow. So I'm going to look at this pimple thing that I've got on this girl, and we need to talk about doing tonal work. So to do tonal work, I need you to come down. We're going to add a new blank layer on this, but I want you to hold down the Option key before you click on Add the new blank layer. So hold down your Option key, and then the Add New Layer, we're just going to add a new blank layer. It's, again, the little icon at the bottom of your Layers palette that's the box with the plus inside of it. Click on that. And what the Option key does is it allows you, instead of just creating a new blank layer, it gives you this option dialog box that comes up, which allows us to set the layer up the way we want to do this. Now you can do this a step at a time. This is just more efficient, it's faster, it's easier to do. So the first thing we're going to name this, we're going to name the layer, and you want to call this Tonal Retouching Detail. Sometimes I'll call it Tonal Retouching Small, but Tonal Retouching Detail. Then in the drop-down menu for mode, you want to come down to Soft Light. And when that happens, you'll get a little box at the bottom that allows you to check right next to it that says Fill with Soft Light Neutral 50% Gray, and then say OK. And it will create this layer for you. And you can see that the layer is indeed filled with 50% gray. But because it's set to soft light, if you click on the blending modes of the layers and you get this drop down, we haven't talked a ton about blending modes. We will get deeper into that as the semester goes on. But basically, if you look at this, it is divided up into individual groups, and they're divided by bars. So you can see there's a little section at the very top. The top section, the very, very top section, is actually the normal section and dissolve. Not many people use dissolve, and normal is what we do 90% of the time. The first section, though, that's blocked off by those little lines are the darkened section. The next section underneath that are the lightened section. The next grouping under that are the contrast sections. And this is where overlay, soft light, hard light, that's where all of these are. By default, in the contrast group, anything that is in your image that is 50% gray is invisible. So you'll see, if you go back up and set this to normal, you can see that you actually see the middle gray that's filling this thing. But if we take the menu blending mode down to soft light, that gray disappears and you see the image underneath it. Hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that it is a hard brush. We're going to start with a hard brush. It's just easier to see. Make sure that the blending mode of your brush is set to normal. Make sure that your opacity is 100%, your flow is 100%, and everything else can stay at its default. Come down onto your image. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I simply want you to click and drag a line across. And what you should see is your image gets darker where I just painted. Did that work for everyone? Did it not work for anyone? We good? Hit the X key to make white your foreground color and do another line someplace else, and you can see that it's made your image lighter. A lot of people do dodging and burning this way. However, one of the things to keep in mind as you look at this is it's not only made your image darker, but specifically if we look at the, well, it's actually if you look at either one of these. What's also happening is, what happens in soft light and overlay both, is that some of the color that we're using to actually do the dodging and burning here actually color your image. And so the problem in doing our tonal work here is that if we use black and white, we end up actually sucking out some of the skin color. You end up, what truly ends up happening is that because black and white are neutral color, they have no color. They are neutral grays. One's very light, one's very dark, but there's nonetheless neutral grays. When you use them, they actually apply some of that, of their own color to the dodge or burn. And so the result is the areas that if you do it heavily in an area, it ends up actually desaturating the area you're working on because it mixes in this gray ink, for lack of a better way of putting it. Does that make sense to everyone? So when we do our dodging and burning, which is what we're going to do on this to do this tonally whatever, we want to actually use skin color to do it so that we can use a very light skin color and a very dark skin color, but when we use those, then we don't get a color perversion in our retouching. We will actually make the skin lighter and darker, but if we use colors that are based on the color of the skin, then we don't get this desaturation part of it, or we don't get any strange color perversion that happens into it. It ends up, it's based on the color of the skin. So that's the game that we're going to play here. So if you've done this, to actually see what your image looks like, or what this layer looks like, hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball of just the layer. And then you can see the whole thing. Because we have nothing underneath it, there's nothing that's being blended, and as a result, you see what the entire layer looks like. And you can see that I've just got basically gray, white, and black. But when I turn the other layers on, again, if you just hover over the eyeball for that same layer, hold down the Option key and click, it'll turn everybody else back on. The overlay part, what ends up happening is that where the area was dark is made darker, where the area is light, it's made lighter, but when the area is that exact middle gray, it actually it's completely transparent. You don't see anything. So to get rid of this, the easiest way to get us back to neutral in here is to simply fill this with 50% gray. To do that, come up to your Edit menu, down to Fill. A dialog box will open up. In the drop-down menu for Contents, come down to 50% gray. Make sure that the blending mode is normal, 100% opacity. There is no transparency, so you don't need to check that, and simply say OK. All we did was fill this thing with 50% gray. That was all we did in this. I'm going to ask you to zoom into this pimple a little bit tighter here. So I'm in at almost 500% here. This is not really where I would retouch, but I wanted to point this out to you again. Why do we see this pimple? Highlight detail, highlight and shadow, right? That's why we see it. That's why it exists. So if I can get rid of the highlight and I can get rid of the shadow, I will also get rid of the pimple. And in doing so, I won't touch the texture of the skin. The texture of the skin will be the texture of the skin. It's always going to sit under my tonal work. Make sense? Okay, so before we do this, and this is difficult to do on a laptop, so sometimes I do this on a laptop. Most of the time I'm working on a monitor bigger than this, and so the next trick that I'm going to show you is definitely how you would want to set up your monitor. But one of the problems that you get into in doing tonal retouching, especially if you're zoomed in as tight as we are zoomed in on this guy, is you get blinded to the amount of shift you've got going on in tone because you're in so tight. You have nothing relative around it to actually really see, to make sure that what you're doing on this incredibly zoomed in detail level is actually fitting on the more zoomed back version of it. So what I need to do is I need to have a version of this that shows me much more zoomed out, and I want to be able to see those at the same time. The problem with this is that if I make a duplicate of this, so I could come up to the image menu and I could come down and say duplicate, but the problem with that is it makes a completely separate copy of this image. And so anything that I do on one of them is not reflected on the other one. I don't want a duplicate of the image. What I want is a second view of the image. So to do that, you come up to your window menu and you come down to Arrange and then down to New Window for, and again, this name will change depending on the file that you have open. The file that we have open is Skin Eyes Retouch. So This is saying, I want a new view of that. So I'm going to bring this up, and you'll actually see it gives you a zoomed out version of this. I'm going to go back to the one that we were actually working on before. And again, I'm going to grab my brush, the B key. I'm going to go back to my soft light detail. And again, I'm going to go over here onto the side of her by this pimple, whatever. And I'm going to click and drag down, and you'll see it makes it lighter on the detailed version. But look at the zoomed out version in the back. You see the exact same thing. So what this is doing is it's giving me two views of my work. One of them is super detailed, but one of them is a little further back, and it's a smart way to work, because again, what you'll find is that if you typically only work in at this 300, 400, 500% range, you will end up overshooting the mark. Your retouching will be too strong. You'll go too far with it. You'll push it too far. Having this second view where it's pulled back gives you a check on it, so you can really sort of see you're in tight enough to be able to do the work, but you also have a version of it that's out far enough so that you realize how it's going in context of the rest of the image to make sure you can see the rest of the image. So that's how we're going to do this. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that part. For the time being, I'm going to move this zoomed out version over to cover up my palette on the other side, on my right hand side. I don't really need that. I need to be able to see my foreground colors and background colors on the other side. So my first move is, it's like I told you guys, I need to make dodging and burning colors that I can actually use that are based on her skin tone. So to do that, you simply click on your foreground color. So I'm going to click on the foreground color picker to open up the color picker. And I just want to do a sample of her skin. Now, when I'd say sample of her skin, if you're doing a lot of beauty work, you would want to avoid any place that's got color makeup on it. You don't need to avoid foundation, but you do need to avoid any place that would have eyeshadow, any place that would have rouge, blush, any of that kind of stuff. You do not want to pick a skin tone based on a color that's been altered. You want a normal skin tone. So you could even use the back of her hand, you could use her arm, there's a lot of places that you can use. I typically avoid highlights and shadows when I do this work because I'm looking for the true neutral skin color, and then I'm going to change what happens to it here in the color picker dialog box. So I'm simply going to come close to this area of the pimple that we're working on and click, and it'll put down a color. Now in my case, I end up using the HSB values on here to control this. So again, the H, which stands for hue, is in degrees, and in my case it's 22 degrees. You should have something that's very close to that, if not exactly that. If you're 21, 22, 23, 24, somewhere in there, you're fine. That part doesn't matter. If you're 60 something, you're in trouble. So, but this is a really mid-tone color. This is not a dodging and burning color. To make it a dodging burning color, I'm going to do this one. This is actually going to be my dodging color to actually make things lighter. I'm going to click on the radio button for the brightness of this image, and remember, whatever radio button you click, that's what the column becomes. I'm going to take the two little arrows that are the slider, and I'm going to drag it up, and I'm watching my little percentage right here, and I'm going to pull it up till I get to like the mid-90s. And this is a typical spot for me to go after. So it makes it considerably lighter, but it still has got way too much tone in it to actually be a good dodging color. So the next thing I'm going to do is click on saturation. It's still too saturated. So I click on the radio button next to the saturation, and I'm going to grab the column becomes saturation, and I'm going to grab those two little arrow guys, and I'm going to pull this down, and typically I'll go down into the low teens. You do not want to go all the way down to the bottom. If you go all the way down to the bottom, you end up with a neutral gray again, because you've completely removed the saturation. If you were to use this color, it will actually then desaturate the area that we're actually trying to do our retouching on. So I'm going to leave it up around the 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that range. And you can see this is an extremely light color of this girl's skin tone. It's a very, very, very light pink, but it is based on her skin tone. And I'm going to say OK to that. Then I need to do the dodging color. This is the dodging color. I need to do the burning color, the darker one. So I'm going to click on the background color and bring up the color picker for the background. And I'm going to pick the same spot. I'm going to click again. I've got the color sampler tool, same spot on her skin. In this case, I got 21 degrees. I'm okay, 21, 22 degrees. I'm fine with that. If you're a real stickler for consistency here, you could conceivably change it to 22, but they are so close to each other, you're never going to know. So in this case, I'm going to leave brightness saturation where it is for the time being, but I am going to click on brightness, and I'm going to bring brightness down now. So I need to drag it down. However, you do not want to go all the way down. If you go down too far, you ultimately end up at black, and we end up with the same problem again. So I'm going to drag my brightness down, and I'm getting down right around 9-10% in that range in there somewhere. However, because this color is so dark, remember when we were looking at our color theory, and it was the double cone, when we took the color wheel, flipped it on its side, and added brightness as the north-south axis, we ended up with that double cone shape. But as you remember, where we were sort of in the middle at the equator part, we had our most saturated. Well, here, I'm just going to show you. This part right here, remember, saturation around the middle, out here, but as we got brighter, as things get brighter, we lose saturation. As things get darker, we also lose saturation. So in the case of our color picker right here, I'm worried about keeping color in there. I need to keep more color in there. As I get darker, I'm losing saturation. So I'm actually going to click on the saturation button to make the column saturation, and I'm going to boost it till I get somewhere in the mid-40s. And that seems like it's a very dark color based on skin tone, but again, it will put in, as we start to do this work, skin tone will actually, it'll put in that color instead of desaturating this or perverting the color to something else. And I'm going to say okay to that. These are now my dodging and burning colors. If you hit the X key, you move back and forth between the two, and now we can actually start to do our work. On my zoomed in side over here, I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit more. It's a little too far out. This is a better view for me. Again, I'm going to keep it over to the side. And so I've got a pretty good view tight and another one out. I'm also going to zoom out a little bit on my 500% is a little too tight on this, so I'm going to zoom back out to like a 400, maybe a 3. No, I'm going to keep it at a 4 right here, just especially for you guys to be able to see it right now. So I want you guys to watch how I do this first, and then I'm going to let you actually go after it. It does involve your tablet now. This is why I said you have to have a tablet to do this work, so you might as well get yours out and actually get ready to use it. I'm going to check the quality of my brush first, though. So the quality of my brush first. You should know, and because it just happened to me, if you actually lay your stylus down on your tablet, your mouse will stop working, or it'll start being really erratic. Again, if you have a roommate that you really don't like, plug in a tablet, especially a wireless one, and then hide it inside of a drawer with the stylus sitting right on top of it. Their mouse will never work again. Not unless they leave they need to get out of range of the tablet to do that. So yeah, anyway. That does sound shitty, doesn't it? Okay, anyway. Check the quality of your brush. So for your brush, you need a completely soft brush, a normal brush, 100% opacity, and 100% flow. Now, we've gone through this before, but do we need to go through again? What is the difference in opacity and flow? Flow involves time, right? So let's just look at this again really quickly because this is important for you guys to know. Hit a brand new synthetic file, Command N, just to bring up a brand new file. Again, I'm going to make my 8x10 file right here. I am going to change my brush so it's a completely hard, just so that it's easier to see. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. I'm going to hit the X key to get my darker color because it's going to be easier to see than that lighter color. And I'm going to leave the opacity, the flow at 100%. I'm going to take the opacity down to 50%. And then I'm simply going to use my tablet and I'm going to click and drag across and back and forth. And again, as you go back and forth, you see you don't pick up opacity at all. It lays down the first layer and then that's it. To get the opacity to build, you lift your stylus off the tablet and then stroke again. That is very similar to, I'm going to go down right underneath it and I need everybody to do this with me. I want you to just start tapping on your tablet in place and you will see that as you do that, you begin to build density doing the same thing. If we cut our opacity down to like the mid-20s and start doing it, again, I'm just tapping in place, you'll see that we can build density up over time. If you drag your opacity all the way back up to 100% again and drag your flow down to like 10%, let's go down to even 5, let's go down even more, 5 or 6%, and then simply hold your cursor down and keep it down and slowly, no, that's not doing anything. Oh, I don't have airbrush on. Okay, great. We'll figure, I'll show you basically what this means. So, unlike opacity at the top where we kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and it actually finally, it never laid down any tone. We had to lift the stylus up and then hit it again. With flow down, you can actually go back and forth and it starts to build in tone and eventually you get to it that way. You never have to lift your stylus up off again. If you add the airbrush to it, that's the little thing that sits on the end, the airbrush to it, and now simply click and hold it down, it starts to build in that tone over time. I'm not moving my palette, I'm not tapping again, I'm just bringing it in. So you can see there are these 3 different ways that we can build density using a brush. People who get really good at tonal retouching ultimately end up here. They end up using a low flow with an airbrush on it and 100% opacity. That is not where I want you guys to start. We need to start with training wheels first. Again, your results will be much better. You'll be much happier. You'll get there much quicker. This is just letting you know why I'm making the choices that I'm making. For me, in the most part, even though I use flow quite a bit in a lot of my work, a lot of times when I come back to doing tonal work, I'll simply drop the opacity and do it there. So you can close this guy up. We don't need it anymore. You don't need to save it. We're going to set this up the way I think you should actually have it set up. I want you to drop your opacity down to 6%. This is a really good standard for mid-tone Caucasian skin. This same thing though, it works on every skin tone that there is. It's just a question of how fast you want this to happen. So if I have darker skin, I tend to set my opacity up a little higher so that it goes faster. If I have super light skin, I set it down even lower. There's some times when I'm doing tonal work on really super light skin, I'll be down at a 1% opacity. So don't let that scare you to get way down there. I'm going to change my flow all the way back up to 100% and I'm going to uncheck the airbrush. I'm going to then check my edge of my brush. You want your brush to be completely soft. So a totally soft, zero hardness brush, normal blending mode, 6% opacity, 100% flow, no airbrush, and the rest can stay at its default. Then I'm going to use the bracket keys to make this about the head, the size, my brush about the size of the head of that pimple. And typically I will start with burning work first. So I've got my darker color is my foreground color. And here is the trick to doing tonal retouching, the thing you need to remember. Everything about this is important, but I want everybody to write this down. I'm going to show it to you because this part is what separates the pros from the amateurs who do not know what they're doing, and it's this. When you are working on your tablet, so I'm working on my tablet right here, you can see my tablet here, a lot of times you're going to be tempted to paint. Especially when we get into like lines underneath our eyes, you're going to be tempted to paint that part. That is not how pixel work actually works in an image, in a digital file. In a digital file, you have blotches. And that's what we need to keep. Even if we've got a long line that we need to fix, we do it in spots. So what you do is this. I'm going to turn this over so I don't actually do it on my image. But you tap. So brush down, tap, 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 tap. You never stroke. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do. It's only tapping. Now your brush can get bigger, it can get smaller, but it is always tapping. I tell people what I really should do is I really should get a tattoo needle and have it fixed with one of these points on the end so that I don't have to do that tapping. But this is why you can't use a mouse or a tablet when you actually do this work. Imagine I do tap, tap, tap. If you actually do the kind of retouching I'm going to ask you to do, you'll do this 500,000 times. That's how many taps. You want to do that with a mouse? You want to hit your little finger on that 500,000 times? No, you'd hate your life. So again, tap, tap, tap. Are we good on this? And believe me, I can spot the people who cheat, especially when we get the lines under the eyes. So here we go. All right, so I'm going to do this first. I'm going to show you because it goes pretty quick. Again, I've got my two views. I'm going to hover over this part. I've got my hand. Typically, this is how I work. My hand on the X key. My left hand is on the X key. My right hand is on my tablet. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to, again, start. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 stop. I'm not really, it's not quite even yet, whatever. That part's fine. I'm good there. I'm going to hit the X key to go to my dodging color. And I'm going to start, it's a bigger area right here, but I've got a much darker little area that's happening here. I'm going to try to bring this darker area up so that it starts to blend in with everybody here. And then I'm going to try to lift it all at once. So I'm just tapping around here, and that actually got part of it there, a little bit down in here, a little bit across in here. Again, all I'm doing is tapping, tap, 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 tap. While I'm here, I'm going to actually hit a little bit of this one guy that's down here. Still tapping. I'm making reference to my big image over here, and I can still see that. I'm going to go back. I think my center is still a little bit lighter than everybody else. Hit the X key and actually tap, tap just a couple times now. That neutral, that gets it to be a little bit better. X key again, I've still got a little bit of a halo around this that I actually need to lift. And then now the whole thing is getting much closer to just one color. So I'm going to make my brush considerably larger to cover that whole space and then tap, tap, tap around all of it. And it looks like my brush is actually hitting too hard in the center, which leads me to believe that I've got the wrong brush selected. So in my general brush drop down, there was another one that was selected in here, and it was actually doing size, and that's why the middle of this actually, as I was doing my tapping, took off on me. So again, in your general brush drop down, make sure that you've selected the top brush. The top two brushes have no pressure on them. The second two brushes control size, and this is where I think one of mine was. Size is controlled by the pressure, and then the last two is opacity is controlled by pressure. Make sure you've got that top one selected, and then I can go in and fix this again. A little bit smaller brush, X, bring that center back in. It is a little bit larger now. And again, I'm making reference to this on the outside, and it's looking pretty good to me. And I need to lighten everything up. So the X key, and then just start to tap around to sort of blend this in. And I'm going to temporarily, I'm checking my zoomed out view, and I can actually come in here now and zoom in on this a little bit closer. And you can sort of see where I'm at right now, and this is what I've done tonally. Now, looking at it at this range, I feel like, okay, this still looks like I maybe took it a little bit too far. It's a little bit too light around that. So I can still continue to work right on this image as well. So again, I'm just going to make my brush a little bit larger. My X key, this is my my burning color right here. And now I'm just doing single pops down to make it actually, and then I might come in a little bit smaller. What is on? My computer is lagging really bad. And so what I need you guys to do is get rid of the pimple using tonal retouching. So again, this is my before and this is my after, and I have done nothing to the texture of this skin. Is this working for you guys? Is this not working for anyone? Are we good on this part? All right, I need everybody to just hold on your space bar, you'll get the hand. Come up to the area that's underneath this girl's eye, and you'll actually see she's got fine little lines that are running underneath her eye. And we are going to, again, I'm going to go back to my more zoomed in version. I want to be able to see both, so I've got my zoomed in and my zoomed out version. And I'm going to work on the zoomed in version. And you'll actually see that there's lines that are running down here. You attack these the exact same way. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. It's a dark line, so I'm using my dodging color, and this is again what I said, you do not paint these lines, do not stroke these lines. It will show, what will end up happening is that the areas on the sides of the darker area, you'll get the line itself to go ahead and lighten up, but you'll also get the areas that are right next to it to lighten up as well, and so you basically trade your problem. You end up instead of having a dark line here, you'll end up having two lighter lines that go on the sides of it. But if you do this doing tapping only, you will be good to go on this. So I'm simply going to start up here and start to tap all the way down. And you can tap forward and backwards. But again, the tapping part is breaking this up, and you will see when we take a look at it, it's a series of discrete little dots that actually blend into the skin. And you can see in my case right now that I've actually gotten rid of most of it already. So again, I'm going to hide my other view really quickly, and if I take a look at my screen, if I turn this back on and off, you can see that the line has actually disappeared. Now, you will get into doing this kind of work, and you can get really frustrated by doing this. You need to turn this eyeball on and off a lot so that you realize that you really are making a serious difference here. But the trick to this is that you're trying to have this be as unnoticeable as it can possibly be. And so I'm going after other lines here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so that I don't have to cover quite so much area. And I'm going to continue to go after it. I'm going after another line that's actually underneath it. Again, all tapping, no stroking. And I can even go after really subtle lines. People ask me all the time, how far should you go? My vote is always that you go too far, and then you can bring it slowly back. So this is now what I've done. Again, if you take these lines on and off, I mean, this just makes such a massive difference. If I zoom back out, look at this area under her eye right here. This is the difference in what I just did. It's very subtle, but this is the difference in making the money and not making the money. Again, if you want to see the work that you actually did, hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball, and you'll actually see it. And this is what it looks like. This is also the reason that we fill this with medium gray, is so that you can actually see the work that you're doing. So if I know that there's a problem with this and I need to fix it, I can actually see it. If this would still work if this was a transparent layer, but it would be impossible to find these retouching marks that we're putting down because they're so subtle. But on a gray background, you'll actually spot it. You won't have any issue with it. Does that make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? All right. Now comes the shitty part. So again, I'm going to hold on the Option key and click on this. So this part works out pretty well. I want to zoom in though, or not zoom in, I'm going to zoom back out to this area. It's the skin that's between her eye and her mouth. It's all the really super pebbly, it's got a lot of texture in it. So again, I'm going to zoom out so that you can see. It's this big area right here. This is like the really difficult spot to actually get to. So I'm going to zoom into this just a little bit. Most of this, but not all of this, is tonal retouching to smooth this out. So I'm going to show you how I would start doing this, and then I'm going to let you guys work on this for just a little bit. And then we're going to look at some other areas about things that we ultimately need to fix in this. So for me, I like to start with the lightening part first. So there's no reason that you can't start with the darkening part first if you want to, but for me, I do the lightening part first. So I've got my dodging color up here, and this is how I do it. So look at my screen really quickly. I'm trying to give you guys some sense of how to do this. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to go at like 300%. It's a little bit easier for me to work on, and I'm going to make my brush slightly bigger. So I've got about a 10-point brush on this. So this is how I start. And I don't want to take this all the way to the ultimate end. So for instance, I'm going to start in this dark area right here, and I'm just looking to lift it a little bit. But you want to keep moving all over the place. So I am tap, 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 and then I get bored and I'm moving up into this area right in here, and then I get bored and I'm moving around into this area. Keep moving a lot. Don't stay into one place. If you stay into one place too long, I can promise you, you will overshoot it. So again, I'm looking for all those little dark places, and I'm tapping the whole time. There's not a single stroke that's happening in here. If you want to see what I've done now, look at my screen, look at the on and off if I take this on and off. And you can see I've just lifted those things very subtly, but I have lifted them. And I keep this up for a little while, so I'm going to continue to work around these parts. And again, don't stay in any one place too long. But then I actually get bored with this, and I stop, and I hit the X key to do a little burning. So now I'm actually going after the light areas that are in here. And again, it's the same trick. I'm moving around as fast as much as I possibly can. Only staying in the lighter areas. Don't get so bored with this that you actually go into, start doing darker areas. And I'm bored again, X key, going after the lightening up areas. X key again, into the darker areas. Every now and then look down at your foreground and background colors to make sure you have not screwed this up and that you think you're actually burning and you're really dodging. So I've been working on this area now for a little bit, and you say to yourself, Jesus, Versa, that doesn't look a bit different at all. And watch this. So again, I'm going to turn my layer on and off, and you tell me that doesn't look different. If we zoom back out, this is where I'm beginning to go, and that skin is beginning to smooth out. Do I have a lot of work in front of me? You bet. If you hold down the Option key and turn this off, that is what the dodging and burning looks like on my image, and that is what the dodging and burning should look like on your image. Is this making sense to everyone? What's going on here? So I can tell you the people who do this really, really well for this image, because this image, every single person who's done this class has done this image. You should be budgeting 8-10 hours on this minimum. It can go longer. Sorry. Couple other things to get though before. I want to show you a couple of, just to give you some idea of what's going on. I need everyone to go to their Session 6 folder, inside the assignment folder. Inside of there, you will actually see there are two small reference images that I've actually given you. One's called Tonal Retouch Large. The other is called Tonal Retouch Small. They are PNGs. I need to give you a reference to show you what your layer should be looking like, to give you some sense of how much work it really takes. If you double click on the small one to actually open it up and zoom into this, take a look at this. This is just that cheek that we're working on right now. You'll also see that there's work on the other cheek. You'll see that there's work on the forehead. You'll see there's work on the chin, all of that. And you say, okay, well, how good could this possibly be? How good can tonal retouching be? So this is how good it can be. So I need everybody to look up at my screen here really quickly. So look at this girl's skin. It is flawless, but it still has all the texture in it. You want to think that that was done using the clone stamp tool. This was actually done, I'll show you. That is all done tonally. This is what her layer looks like. Look at the difference. Look at what she accomplished without the first clone stamp tool, without the first healing brush tool, none of it. This is real skin that is flawlessly retouched, not some chunk of plastic. Is this making sense to everybody where we're going with all of this? That's why I said this is the shit. You do not do this on your friends' images where you know, they've got, 8 images of full-length fashion and they want to give you $100. This is the shit the big boys and big girls ultimately get for, retouching celebrities for top-end cosmetics. This is how they do it. This is making sense to everyone? Okay. Fortunately or not fortunately, it doesn't end here. All right, I'm going to close that part up. A couple of other things that we need to look at. So, if you look in the lower part of her cheek right down here, you have what I've always referred to this as the cigarette burn. I have no idea what this really is on the side of her cheek. It's clearly some discoloration on her skin that makeup person has actually gone in and one could argue made it worse. Basically what they've done is they've tried to cover this. If you zoom in really close, you can sort of see it's clearly some foundation or concealer that they're using sort of on top of this to try to hide this. You cannot fix this using tonal retouching. That part simply won't work. So we need to actually resort to pixel retouching for this. So this is when we are going to go back to the healing brush set and we're going to take a look and you guys are going to decide which version of using that tool you think is actually the better option. But I also need to show you how to use the tools, because if you don't use the tools correctly, they can do as much damage for you as they can do against you as for you. So this is what the pixel layer is all about. So if you click on the pixel layer down at the bottom, this is basically where we're actually going to start, is working with him. There are 3 options for this that I would actually use on this. This is not clone stamp work, because again, clone stamp tool will actually replace this with texture and tone and color from somewhere else, and you'll be able to spot it. But this is also what I was talking about when you use this tool, any of those tools. We are going to be replacing the texture here, and if we replaced it using a hard-edged brush, you would see you'd be able to see the transition from the because it's an abrupt thing from old texture to brand new texture. It's really abrupt. You can spot it. So we soften up the brush, but the problem in softening up the brush is that then in that transition area where you're going from old texture to new texture, there comes a point where you are mixing those textures, where you have old textures actually showing through new texture, and those things combine together, and that combination is not real texture. And again, if you do too much of that, you end up with plastic face again, and it defeats the whole problem. So with that being said, I'm going to go after this and show you 3 different methods to do it. Please do these with me, because I want you guys to then look at it and decide which of them we think is the best way to do it. So I'm going to click on the healing brush tool. The first tool that I'm going to go for is the spot healing brush tool. This is where Photoshop actually picks the source. In doing that, you need to use your drop-down menu and make sure that your hardness is at 50%. Again, it's the compromise. If I have a brush that's too hard, I can see the edge. If I have a brush that's too soft, I start blending texture, old texture, new texture together, defeats the whole purpose. 50% is where I'm going to go with this guy. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this, and then make sure that content aware is actually the button that's actually pressed. So I'm going to come over to my image. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. You don't really want to make this as large as the whole thing, but here's the trick. Remember, and this is how all the tools work in this group. What it's going to do is it's going to replace this texture, but then it's going to look at the color and the tone that surrounds this and use that color and tone to recolor the new texture, and hopefully it will be a patch that, or it'll be a fix that that actually works for us. However, and this, so look at my screen, this is where people fuck this up. I'm going to start with the healing brush tool with the spot tool. So again, the spot tool, Photoshop picks the source for you. So all you do is paint across this. But the trick to this is, watch what happens to this. I'm going to only paint over half of this. If I stop right now and let go, what's going to happen is that this area that had not been fixed, that tone and that color is going to get pulled into my new patch, because that's how the tool is designed to work. So instead, I'm going to hit, and you see it happening right here. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, if you're going to use any of these tools, you need to hit this thing in its entirety. So I'm going to start out here, and I'm going to cover the entire thing, making sure you get all the makeup that's sticking out at those edges, and then let go. And that to me is a better patch. Now I look at it and I still think that looks fake. I can still spot that, but nonetheless, I'm going to do a history snapshot of this. So again, click on the camera that's right underneath the history, at the bottom of the history palette, and I'm going to call this Spot Healing. And say OK. And then I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it. So again, I'm undoing that part. I'm going to try 3 different methods of doing this and see which one I like the best. So I just hit Command Z, so it brings the cigarette burn back. The next tool that I'm going to go after in the group is the next one down, the regular healing brush tool. With the regular healing brush tool selected, again, I need to check the brush. Again, healing brush and spot are different. So I set the spot healing brush at 50% hardness, but look at my healing brush tool, it's at 100% hardness. So again, click that to make it a 50% hardness. Make sure that your blending mode is normal. Again, by default, source should be sampled. Again, I'm going to continue to leave aligned on there, only working on the current layer. We're fine on this. But now we need to pick where we think is a good source for this. So I've got an option that I can do that's sort of up above it, sort of moving to the upper right of my image, down below it, sort of the lower left, or possibly underneath. The trick to this part is that the texture that we're going to use to replace this with, you want it to have about the same focus that your place where you're trying to fix this is. So if I come down underneath her, this is actually falling away and softer in focus. It's also got some fuzzy hair in there. That's all texture that will get brought into this. So that's not a good option for me. If I look up higher to the upper right part of this as well, she's got sort of like the apple of her cheek is actually receding back deeper into space. So it is going to be less in focus than the area that's right down underneath it, that's sort of in this area, so the lower, moving towards the lower left-hand corner. That's the place where I'm going to sample from here. I think it's the closest to the focus that this is actually going to have. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm going to hold down my Option key and click to make a sample point down here at the bottom. And I'm going to come up and click and start to take this part out. And again, you need to hit everything at once. You cannot leave part of the old stuff in, or it gets built into the coloration, the recoloration of the new texture. So that seems to me to be a little bit better than the other one was. So I'm going to do a color snapshot of this and call it Healing Brush Tool. And say OK. And then again, Command Z to undo that. Again, it doesn't undo the history step that we made. You can see at the very top of our history palette, I've got spot healing and the healing brush tool both are sitting right there. So I'm going to come back down. We're going to do one last method, and the last method that we're going to do on this is the patch tool. So with the patch tool, again, it's in the healing brush set. Click on it, you'll get the flyout menu and come down to the patch tool. It's the third one down on mine. And the patch tool works different than the other two. In the patch tool, what you end up doing is that you actually pick the destination first and the source second. So it is a lasso tool, and as a matter of fact, you can actually do this with the lasso tool and then pick the patch tool, and it will still respect what you've selected. But I'm going to select an area around this. Again, make sure that you go further out than you actually need to go so that you get all of the makeup in addition to all of the discolored skin. So this is now the selection that I want to fix. Again, this is the destination. Then put your cursor in the middle of this selection and you'll see you get the patch tool with little arrows that are pointing. What those are telling you to is they're saying click and drag this selection to what you want to be the source. So where is the good skin you want me to use? So again, I think this area that's down in this lower left area is probably better for focus. So I'm going to simply click and drag this down. You'll notice that there is a color shift. Again, the skin that I'm going to use as my source is actually a little bit darker than the patch area that I'm going for. But again, it's going to grab the texture and then it will use the surrounding area to match the color and the tone. So I'm going to then simply let go. And you'll notice that all of a sudden that patch just got lighter when I let go. Hit Command D to deselect, and then I'm going to do a history snapshot of this. And I'm going to call it Patch Tool. Command Z to undo that. Command D to deselect. Go all the way to the top of your history palette, and you should see 3 different options. You should see Spot Healing, Healing Brush, and Patch Tool. I'm going to click on the Spot Healing. I could spot that fucking patch right here with Vaseline rubbed in my eyes. I'm going to go to the Healing Brush tool, considerably better, and then the Patch Tool. And actually, the Patch Tool, I feel like I can spot that lightness better than I can the Healing Brush tool. The Healing Brush tool, to me, seems to be the most seamless. What about you guys? And I got to be honest with you, I've done this exercise 1,000 times, and at this stage of the game, it's different every year. It's like, oh, 1 year it's the patch tool, 1 year it's whatever. But you need to start thinking like this. You need to start working like this, realizing that there isn't only one tool to do one thing. Does this make sense? Okay, at this point, I would save your work, because again, this is your homework. But we need to go back to the tonal part of this. I need to show you 2 other parts of the tonal part, and then we'll look at some other things to actually go about. So I want to go back up to her eyeball again, to the area that's up around her eye. And we need to talk about a couple of things. So I'm zooming in to the area that is right underneath. So again, this is her eye on the right-hand side of the image. You'll see that there's a couple of little white dots. There's a couple of spectral highlights that she has in her eyes. But right underneath it, there's a little white dot that's sort of like, again, look up at my screen, you'll see this area that I'm actually talking about. It's this little white dot that's actually right here. I'm going to go after this doing my tonal retouching. So I'm back up to my tonal detail retouching layer. Do not be doing this on your pixel layer and thinking you're doing tonal work on your layer. Again, this is not something to try to do when you're really tired. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. Again, I'm going to just, even though I know it's still a soft brush, I'm just going to check to make sure that it is normal. My opacity on this is still 6%. Again, I'm doing the tonal work on this skin, 100% flow. Then I'm going to hit the X key to make my burning color, this color for this dot, and then I'm simply going to start going after this. So I'm hitting tap, 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 tap. And I get frustrated doing this, so I boost my opacity up to 11%, and I continue to tap, 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 and then look what happens. If you take a look at my screen, you will actually see I never dodged that color down. I mean, I never burned that color down. It simply put a ring around it. And the reason this is happening is there is nothing in there to burn. That is a completely white pixel. You can burn this all day long. There's nothing to deepen, there's no tone there, so there's nothing to make it darker. It's always going to stay white no matter what I do. The ring around it, the thing that makes like the donut around it, is because with all that tapping, you don't ever stay exactly just on that little dot. You actually are feathering that tonal shift out all the way around it. If you hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball of your tonal layer, you'll see it's just a black dot on your layer, or almost, it's a very dark flesh-colored dot on your layer. But that's what's causing it. So you realize that things that are extremely light, approaching white, or extremely dark, approaching black, you cannot dodge and burn those. They simply won't. You'll end up getting these halos around it, and it doesn't work. We can fix this though. Again, the easiest way to fix it is I'm going to just take the L key to get the lasso tool. I'm going to circle this guy, and then same trick we did before, up to the edit menu, down to fill, and fill it with 50% gray. It got rid of it, Command D to deselect, and now when I look at it, it comes back in all its glory. So I need to get rid of this. However, I have to do it on my pixel layer, but I've already talked about the dangers of doing this kind of work on a pixel layer. So what we need to do is we actually need to use either a clone stamp tool or a healing brush tool that will do the least amount of damage to the surrounding skin. And so to do that, in this case, in my opinion, the best tool for this is going to be the clone stamp tool with restrictions placed on it. So the clone stamp tool in chains is the way I like to think about it. So when you guys use clone stamp tool in your past, whatever you do any of you actually just create an empty layer above the layer that you're retouching and then retouch using the clone stamp tool? That's how most people do it, right? So we're going to look at an example of this to just sort of see what's going on here. I'm actually going to do this above my pixel layer just so that you can sort of see what's going on. So I want everybody to do this with me. For the time being, turn off your eyeball for the tonal retouching. I just don't want things to be more confusing. Go ahead and select your pixel layer right here. And then we're going to put a blank layer on top of it. So if you just click and you put an empty layer on top of it, we could be doing this is going to be pixel retouching, but I don't want to screw up our pixel layer here because this is the wrong way of doing it. So but at any rate, I just wanted to show you that this is ultimately what happens. So we're going to use the clone stamp tool, hit the S key to get it. Okay, my computer is really unhappy right now. Hang on one second. All right, I have my blank layer here. I'm going to hit the S key to get the clone stamp tool. Again, in the clone stamp tool, check to make sure that your hardness is at 50%. Remember, we changed it all to actually look at the samples of that. 50% brush, I'm also going to click on this soft round part and then change it to 50%. And click on near the word Adobe to get that flyout menu to actually go away. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I'm actually going to go after this part right here. Make my brush considerably smaller. And so this is what most people would do. They would find an area that's on the outside here. They would actually hold down the shift key. So you need to change your sample from current layer, which is empty, to current and below. So again, that will now sample the pixel layer that's underneath it. If you kept it on current layer, nothing would change because there's nothing on that current layer. So then I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to come over, and I'm going to just paint over that guy, and everything should be great. However, in doing that, I've not only gotten rid of the little white dot, I've actually impacted the skin that's right around that little dot to blend this whole thing in. And I don't want to do that. I want to only fix that little white part. I want to keep that. Yes?
Sorry, could you do the layer thing again?
Sure. I'll just start over. All right, so we've got our background layer, our pixel layer, and our tonal retouch layer, right? Okay, so I turned off the eyeball for the tonal retouch layer. I selected the pixel layer, and then I simply added a blank empty layer up above it. Then I'm going to make sure I've got the S key, the clone stamp tool. Make sure that, again, the edge of that clone stamp tool is 50% hardness, the compromise. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to hold down the the Option key to set my source point. And I'm going to come over and just paint over the little white dot, and it gets rid of it. But again, it didn't just get rid of that little white dot. It also replaced pixels that are around that little white dot. That's how this whole thing is getting blended in. I want, again, this is the $20,000 retouch. That's not acceptable to me. That is too heavy-handed on this. I want to restrict this even further. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. So instead, you can use blending modes with your clone stamp tool. So if you come up to the blending mode drop-down menu in the options palette, drop-down menu, what you can say is, I only want to darken this. And the reason you would pick darken is that because the area that is around this white spot is the same tone as the area that I'm doing my source from. And because it's the same tone, darken should protect it. Darken should only be affecting things here that are actually lighter than the sample. So I'm going to try this guy again, and it looks like it's doing a great job again. But it isn't. Hit Command Z to undo that. We're going to change this blending mode to lighten now and do the same trick. Again, I'm going to sample from the side, come back over, and it's actually going to fix it again. So it looks like my blending modes are not working, but that is not true. What's happening is, because this is a transparent layer, there is no meaning to lighten or darken because there's nothing here. So if you do your pixel retouching on an empty layer, you can't use blend modes to do this. So throw that layer away, and instead we've got a pixel copy here. We've got the layer that we were using as our pixel copy. It's got all of the information in there. That gives it something that does have reference for lighter or darker. So to see what that means is that I'm going to change the blending mode of my brush again back to darken. I'm going to sample right next to it. So again, hold down the Option key, sample, come across, and it does exactly what I wanted it to do. However, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it and change the blending mode to lighten and do the same trick. And you'll see it doesn't change it because it's now respecting blend modes. And because it is respecting blend modes, the only thing that changes when I use the darken blend mode is that little white dot. The area that is around that little white dot is unaffected because that area around the little white dot is the same color as my source. It's neither lighter nor darker, so none of it changes. You cannot get a more targeted, restricted clone stamp work than using this method. So again, it's always on a copy of your pixel content. Change your blending mode to darken. Sample right next to it and get rid of that part. Now, we can continue this process around. Again, there's a couple of other parts down here that need to be fixed. In the area that's on her skin, you will see there's certain little areas here, like these little dots in here are all burnable. All of these you can actually get with tonal retouching. I'll show you. I'm going to turn my tonal retouching back on, hit the B key. I've got my burning color that's on there. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, not bigger, smaller, and simply hit this area right in here, and I can bring that down. And that guy is, for the most part, actually gone now. So again, this is the difference that in that area. So that guy's gone. But I'll never get this little guy that's right up here to go. So I go back to my pixel retouching layer, hit the S key, again, hold down the Option key to sample, and come up here and actually take care of that guy. And while I'm here, I'm probably going to hit this guy as well. So I would go around some of these, and you'll actually see my cursor, my source point is staying, it's not changing, it's staying up at the very same place. I'm going to click on a line so it doesn't do that. And take care of this guy. And again, just some of these that I feel like are going to be too light to actually burn down. But the rest of them, I don't want to change because I'm fucking the skin up right now. There's no two ways about this. It's just that's just the reality. And I want to do this at a minimum. So again, I've got a couple down here that need to be hit. Rest of this, I'm fairly certain I can get all with tonal work. So this part up here, I can't. And that one I can't. And this one I can't. However, people do this. See these little places in the corner of our eye? These are the things that give you the key to moisture. So take a look at what happens here. I'm going to show you this version. I'm going to do a quick snapshot of this. Before. I'm going to get rid of the highlights, these little spectral highlights in the corner of her eyes. I'm still doing the same trick, pixel work. Dots, no stroking. Dead girl. This is how you make people look dead. Remove the highlight, remove the moisture from their eyes, remove the moisture from their lips. You take that away, she's dead. Look at the difference in this. Live girl, dead girl. Make sense? All right. I did a quick trick before, and I just want to show you guys what this is about, and then we'll take a look at some other things really fast. Right before I did this thing, you can see I've got a lot of clone work that's in here. I do go all the way back to my brushes, but let's say I did right before I did this work on her eyes. I did a snapshot of that, and this snapshot actually gives me a vision of what this image looked like right before I did that clone stamp work on it. You can actually paint with history. And so right now, I want to undo all of this work that I did in here, but this goes quite a bit, quite a ways back. And it actually could be thousands of steps of history back as long as I had a snapshot of what this thing looked like before I did that. You do not want to pick your history snapshots. What you want to do instead is, if you look to the left of your history states, you'll see that there's a little brush that sits right here. This is what your image looks like when it opens up. Everybody will have the same thing when it opens up with that little brush there. That little state would actually possibly work, but I know this snapshot will definitely work. So you do not pick the snapshot, you simply click right next to it to move that history state brush down. Now when I use the history brush, I can paint with what my image looked like when I made this snapshot. And when I made this snapshot, those highlights, those catch lights were still in her eyes. So the history brush is underneath the clone stamp tool. If you click, you'll get a flyout menu. You've got history brush or art history. You want to make sure that you pick the history brush. It works like all other brushes. It has a hardness to that. I'm going to make mine 50% hardness. It has blending modes, it has opacity, it has flow, but I'm working on my pixel layer because that's where I took these things out, and I'm simply going to paint over this to bring them back in. And it's that simple. History brush painting is critical to us in this class. We use it for a whole number of reasons. Are there questions about this part? Are we good? All right, there's one final thing I need to show you because it's part of the homework assignment, and that's how to fix the hole that is in her hair. So that's the part we're going to do now. Please do this with me. We're actually getting well along in your homework. Not that you're not going to have to spend quite a bit of time doing this, but nonetheless, that is what it is. Okay, so the way to go about doing this. We've looked at doing similar things to this before. When we were actually doing the hair fix for Sunny's hair, we did this same thing. Instead of using clone stamp or healing brush tool to replace this, what we're going to do instead is we're going to actually use the very hair that we've actually got going on here. Now, something to keep in mind is if I had access to this entire shoot, I would also be looking at other copies of this girl's hair that are same girl, same light, same situation. I would be looking at other options to see if I could steal hair from something else. There may actually be a frame where her hair was actually pushed up higher and it was all one solid piece. There's nothing to stop me from stealing from that. So it would be a place to go. I'm not going to go out on the internet though and try to find hunks of hair that I think might match this. That will never happen. So I don't have any other images from this shooting, so I'm going to have to make do with the ones that I've actually got. So again, please do this with me. This is pixel work, so we're going to start on our pixel layer. You can leave the tonal stuff on if you want. It doesn't make any difference. Again, this is done in the correct order, but I'm going to start on the pixel layer. I'm going to grab the L key, hit the L key to get the lasso tool, and you want to select every bit of hair that you can see on her forehead. So look up at my screen to see what I'm talking about. I'm simply going to drag to make sure you get everything. I'm just dragging all the way outside of this. And I've got a big old chunk of her head. I've got some of her hair, but all of the hair is selected in this. That part becomes critical. If you select too small of a spot of it, then when you go to do your patch or your transform and that kind of stuff, you can actually run out of hair, and then you have to start the whole process over. It's not that you can't recover from it, but you got to start the whole process over. So I've got a big selection of this selected. I'm going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. And you'll see it's created a layer here that's got just that selection that's up in the top. However, just like we did with Sunny, we don't want to use this thing unaltered, because if we do, all you're going to see is a pattern in her hair. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform this. I'm going to make it skinnier. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to make it longer. So again, I'm dragging out a hair piece. I'm going to make it even skinnier still. And and maybe rotate just a little bit more. And then I'm going to just guess where I need to put it. So I don't really know where it needs to go. I'm merely guessing that I'm in the right spot, but that part doesn't matter. Go ahead and say OK. Click on the little check mark at the very top. Now to use it, to work with it, for me, the way I like to work with things is I'm a person who adds things. I'm not a person who takes away. So I could conceivably put a layer mask on here and start painting away the shit that I didn't want to see, but that doesn't really work for me. So instead, I'm going to do it, instead of subtracting, I'm going to add. So I need to put a black layer mask on this hair patch. To do that, hold down the Option key and click on Add Layer Mask. It will put on a black layer mask, and it will hide the whole hair patch that we just did. If you can't remember that, I'm going to throw that guy away. You could simply add a layer mask, a white one, and hit Command I, invert it. Does the same thing. I'm going to throw that guy away. If you can't remember that, simply add layer mask, and then you'll see in the properties panel up here for your layer mask that you can invert it. Just click on invert. Either way, I'm getting rid of it. Then I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, and I'm going to make my brush larger, about the size of this hair patch in here. But look what's happened to my foreground and background colors. You don't see your dodging and burning color anymore. You only see black and white. If you click on your pixel layer right now, you go back to your dodging and burning colors. But if you click on the layer mask, you get black and white. Well, why? Because you cannot have color in a layer mask. Again, all the masks that are in the channels are all black and white. All the alpha channels that we've ever made are all grayscale. There's no color in any of those. That's why that's happening. And again, if I click on the pixel layer, it remembers the dodging and burning colors that I was working with, because you can have color in a pixel layer, but you can't do it on a layer mask. So just so you understand that's what's going on, you don't have to rebuild your colors. White is my foreground color, which is what I want, so that I'm actually going to paint this area in. I'm going to check on the quality of my brush. 0% is too soft. Again, that will cause old hair to be mixed with new hair, which creates fake hair. Won't work for me. I can't, though, use a full 100% or I will spot the edge. So 50% is my, it's what I'm going to live with. Normal blending mode, back to 100% opacity, 100% flow. And I'm simply going to start to paint in this area where I know the mask should actually be. Now, you can see that when I do that, the area that's underneath it, my hair fix, whatever, it's also, the skin is completely showing. If you hold down the Option key and you click on the mask, look at what my mask looks like. And this is a problem a lot of you guys are going to get into, so please avoid this. Don't do this. If I use this mask, what's going to happen is that where this mask opens up here at the very top, it's going to, all of a sudden hair is just going to appear starting right there. That's not ever going to work. It's going to be old hair in the dark area of this mask, and then where the mask is actually revealing the new hair, it's just boom, out of nowhere, it's just going to start brand new strands of hair. You don't want that. You want to continue this mask all the way up to the edge of the image, so that I never have a place where I'm starting new hair and old hair, where those two actually, something just starts out of nowhere. Even though I don't need to replace the hair that's up at the top, I need to do it so that my patch makes sense. So then I'm going to click on the pixel part again to turn it back on so that I can see it. The problem that I have now, though, is that the mask is in the right place, but what's underneath the mask is not in the right place. It's the wrong hair that's underneath it. So I want to be able to move the hair that's underneath it. I want to be able to move the patch, but I don't want to move the mask. The mask is in the right place. So I'm going to click on the chain link that separates the pixel content from the mask. If you click on that, that chain goes away. Then select the pixel content, which is the hair patch. Hit the V key to get the move tool, and you can move this around, and you can see it's moving underneath the hair that was actually, the mask is in the right place, but now this part's actually moving underneath it, and I can see where it needs to go. However, look at the very top of my image right here. You can see that I've got a problem right here. I've got hair that's just starting and stopping in the middle of nowhere right up here. So I need to, even though I've gotten the links broken, I can actually now transform the pixel content without transforming the mask, because the link has been broken between these two. However, I need to transform this outside of my image, and I can't do that in the regular view of this. I need to go to the Pasteboard. So the F key will actually take me there. Then I can actually make sure that you've got the hair is the patch is what you're actually is selected. Hit Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. And in this case, I'm simply going to stretch this out, and you'll see it pulled that whole hair out. However, I've got a repeating pattern that exists right here, so I'm going to continue to pull it out further so that I don't see that repeating pattern. Then I'm going to rotate this a little bit in place. I'm actually going to move it around to see if I can't get a little bit better fix. You'll see I'm bringing her eye back into this situation right here. I don't want to do that. I'm also going to crush this a little bit to get a little bit better set on it. And this, even though it's made from the one right next to it, it does not look completely like the one that's next to it. So I like that part. You can also warp this. So if you look at the icon that sits up at the very top, this little thing that's right next to the word bicubic, if you click on that, that will allow you to actually, it puts a grid on your pixel content that gives you control handles that will allow us to actually bend the hair. So I'm actually going to bend this in till I put a little bit of a curve in it and maybe pull this out a little bit, or actually, yeah. Just again, to change this up so it doesn't look the same. And I'm gonna go ahead and say, okay, I like that. I'm gonna hit the check mark on it. And this took care of part of my problem, but not all of my problem. So I like this part right here. At this stage of the game, I'm going to merge this down into my pixel content. So to do that, you hit Command E and it merges it down. This is now part of my pixel layer, which is exactly where it should be. Then you do the whole process over again. The L key to get the lasso tool. Select all of the hair. Jump it to its own layer. Before I do anything, I'm just going to put a layer. I'm going to put a layer mask on this that's black. So again, Option Delete. Option Add Layer Mask. Get the brush tool, and again, I'm going to make it a little bit skinnier brush tool now. I'm still going to start at the top and paint over all the area that I know that I need to fill in. So hold down the Option key, look at my mask, make sure that this seems more solid like that. Break the link between the mask and the pixel content, select the pixel content, hit Command T, and again, we just do all the same things that we were doing before. I can actually change this, bring it back a little bit, probably warp this too a little bit, so I've got just, it's not exactly the same. That's sort of a critical part of all of this, so I don't look, I'm just getting stripes down here. It looks more stripy than anything else. Go ahead and say OK to that. Hit the V key to get the move tool. Push this back up. That part doesn't look too bad. Command E to merge it down. And that's how you would actually go about fixing the hair patch. I'm getting a phone call now from China. Really? Unbelievable. Are there questions about any of this? Okay, so you do have those reference images. The last thing I'll show you one thing, and I've got 1 minute to actually do it. We are going to actually create another tonal layer. So I'm selecting the very top one. I'm holding down the Option key. I'm going to click on Add Layer. I'm going to call this Tonal Retouch. Large. Again, click on my drop-down menu to make it soft light. Click on the check mark next to the fill with soft light neutral color. Say OK to this. So what this is about, and you want to keep this stuff separate from your detail work. Your detail work will take forever. You do not want to run the risk of screwing all of this really detailed work up, but you need to fix larger areas of her skin to smooth them out. This isn't about texture as much as this is about tone. In the same way foundation works for makeup, foundation, the idea behind foundation is that it gives your skin, it removes the blotchiness. It gives it a more even appearance. And so what do I mean by blotchiness? What I mean is that if you look at this area right here, you can see it's a little bit darker. If you look at the area underneath her eyes, right here, the puffiness here, a little bit darker. You can see that there's a little darkness that's actually happening over here, something that's coming down the center of her nose. There's all of those things. There's a mustache line along her upper lip. All of that needs to be fixed tonally, but you do not want to mix it in with your detail work. So I'm going to go back to a brush. It's the same dodging and burning colors that I've had before. I'm going to hit the X key to give me my dodging color. I'm going to drop my opacity again down to 6%. Same thing that we were doing, just larger brushes and on a larger area. 100% flow, make sure that my brush is completely soft now. That one was a 50% hardness, normal blending mode. And again, it's dot, dot, dot. So I'm going to brush a little bit smaller here and just coming across, dot, 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 dot. And you can already see it's beginning to lift that color underneath her eye. And I'm going to go after this area that's right into here. and it's actually lifting that color as well. At this stage of the game, this seems like it's happening way too fast to me, so I would drop my opacity down to like a 2 or 3%. And then again, this whole area in here needs to be lightened. So I'm going to come down here like this. So at any rate, to show you what this looks like to end all of this discussion, you do have another PNG in your folder right here that is the Tonal Retouching Large. If you actually take a look at it, this is what Tonal Retouching actually looks like compared to the small work, which is what this looks like. And to show you ultimately the ultimate effect of it, this is what it ends up doing for you. So this is her Tonal Retouching Small. I bring all the texture, but this is what the Large does. Look at how that smooths out this face. That Tonal Retouching Large is the $1 million retouch. Does this make sense, what's going on? Can you guys catch this? And again, this is what hers looks like. So you can see it's quite a bit of lightening in here, much softer version of it. There's some darkening that's happening right down in here, but that's the moneymaker right there, guys. Questions about this? I know that this was a lot today, but it's a lot every day. So the assignment is to retouch this as flawlessly as you can do it using tonal retouching. I will be looking at a very limited set of pixel work. This is this girl's pixel work right here. You can see I'm going to turn it on and off. It's like virtually nothing. It's a couple of those, it is the cigarette burn. It's a couple of those little white dots, and that is it. All right, are we good on this? All right, I'll see you guys next week.
How did you get the large layer to fill with the gray again?